Awesome. And y'all, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. I'm hoping to have everyone out of here in an hour. I think that'd be super awesome, give you a little bit more of your time back, even though we do have the space until 2:30. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, y'all. Oh, there's a way to do this. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Well, you know what? I can't see the chat. So if you cannot see my screen, please come off mute and let me know. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right, y'all. So thank you so much for joining today's presentation. This is another one of our training boosters, this time about how to pull credit reports. And so I've talked to everyone at all the different DV programs about training topics, information that advocates would find useful, and pulling credit reports came up many different times from many of your teams. And so we thought, let's do a little bit of a refresher. And so very excited to kind of dig into some of the nitty-gritty with pulling credit reports, which is a requirement in order to make a referral to the Texas Advocacy Project for the pilot program. And so I'll be looking off to my screen here. For those of you who do know me or don't, my name is Brianna Bordley. I work at Texas Appleseed. We are not a direct service organization, so we do not work directly with clients. We do policy work. However, we are one of the organizations that coordinates the pilot program. And so it is my responsibility to talk to all of the DV programs, which is why you see all of the emails from me about updates about the programs, important things that are coming up, meetings that we have going on, and training boosters like this one. Before I came to Texas Appleseed, I worked at a few different DV programs in Texas. And then when I was in school back in Kentucky, Safe Alliance, which is in Austin, Texas, Hope Alliance, which is in Round Rock, Texas, all Central Texas area. Worked with survivors mainly in shelter programs and rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing was actually the last program that I was a part of, and ended up making the transition into policy in 2021. And so coordinating this pilot program is one of my main jobs. And so that's why I'm always here to answer any questions that y'all have, and you'll always have some really good ones. So if you have any during this time, you don't even need to raise your hand because I'm not going to be able to see it. You can just come off of mute and ask, and I will check the chat occasionally too to get any questions. Okay. So we're going to go over a brief little refresher of coerced debt. So this is a time if you have specific coerced debt questions to ask and let me know. And then we're going to talk about what credit reports are, how to pull a credit report, some safety considerations. I'm going to give y'all a brief view of what a credit report actually looks like so that you can make sure you're pulling the right thing, and then what you do once you pull a credit report. And so a little coerced debt refresher. And so as you all may know or be familiar with, coerced debt is a type of financial abuse. And financial abuse falls under the very broad spectrum that is economic abuse. And so when we're talking about coerced debt, we're talking about debt that is non-consensual, meaning a survivor did not consent to taking out this debt. It's usually a credit-related transaction, so a credit card, a car loan, even a payday loan, and it occurs within an abusive intimate relationship. However, we do know of cases where coerced debt occurs and it's not an intimate partner relationship, such as foster care youth who are exploited by potential foster parents, or even older adults who are being exploited by caretakers. When it comes to coerced debt, it really falls at the intersection of domestic violence and identity theft. So in order for an abuser to take out debts in a survivor's name, they end up technically stealing their identity, right? They're using their social security number and a lot of other personal information in order to take out that debt. So that's where the identity theft piece comes in. And then we have the domestic violence piece. Domestic violence, as we know, is not solely physical. Financial violence is a big part of that as well. And so that's where we see coerced debt at the intersect of both of these really important and pervasive issues. And when it comes to coerced debt, the survivor has lost all control over the ability to make financial decisions for themselves. So this is where we see that connection. And a lot of the times too, taking out coerced debt is just the safest option for a survivor, if they happen to know about it. And so there are three main mechanisms of coerced debt. So first, we have fraud. This is what is typically known as identity theft. This is where a survivor has no idea at all that a debt has been taken out. Usually they'll find out, for example, by getting called by a debt collector. The survivor will say, oh, this isn't my debt. I didn't take this out. And a debt collector will provide the survivor with information to show, no, you did take this out.
Jangan
And
activated mali.
sorry,
So is number jangan activating number number show number.
sorry, someone's off mute, so I'm gonna mute you. It happens. Okay, so fraud. Survivor has no idea. Next, we have coercion. So this is actually where a survivor does know. So they are aware that the debt has been taken out, but it was because of demands and threats made by the abuser. And so these are the debts where a survivor knows, but they felt threatened to take out this debt, or the abuser forced or demanded them to take out this debt. And so that's why they know. But again, that is not consent in Texas. So it is still identity theft and it is still coerced debt. And then you have manipulation. Oh, here's the chat box. I think I can pull that over here and check. Oop. All right, I'm just gonna check, make sure we don't have any questions. Okay, great. Shalonda, great to see you here. And so manipulation, that is when we have an abuser that is being very conscious of, manipulating the conditions or information around some type of financial situation that leads a survivor to take on debt that they wouldn't have occurred. And so an example I give of this, and this is actually an example that I had with a client that I worked with, is their abusive partner lied to them about a medical debt that they had. They lied to them and said that they were in the ER, that they needed to take out a loan in order to take out this debt. That ended up being completely false. That was not a correct representation of what happened. And so a survivor took out a payday loan in order to pay off their abuser's medical debt that didn't ever exist. The abuser just used that or those funds for themselves. And so a couple of different examples that we're talking about here. This is an abuser making a survivor take out a credit card or a loan against their wishes. So that's that coercion piece. This is an abuser taking out a loan, mortgage, credit card, or some type of car finance agreement in the victim's name. That could be fraud, meaning the survivor doesn't know, or that could also be coercion. This is putting bills in the victim's name, like rent, utility bills, or cell phone contracts, without, again, the survivor's consent. So these are all examples of coerced debt. And like I had mentioned, just the pure nature of coerced debt means that there are negative consequences, sometimes even violent consequences, for not doing what the abuser says, for not taking out the debt. And this is one of the reasons why, if a survivor is aware, will agree to take it out. They're not really consenting. They just feel like they have to, or that they're in danger. And so the main question is, okay, how does a survivor then find out if they have coerced debt in the first place? I brought up an example of a debt collector contacting the survivor, which is one of the most common ways survivors find this out. But there is another way to be proactive and determine if a survivor has coerced debts. And that is by pulling their credit report. And that is why pulling credit reports is such an essential component of this pilot program for several different reasons. The biggest being, in order to find out if a survivor is eligible for the pilot program, we need to see if they have coerced debts in the first place. That's not your job. We're not asking you to look through an account of all the survivor's debts and say, okay, this is coerced debt, but we are asking you to pull the credit report so that an attorney can end up reviewing the accounts for the survivors themselves. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And so for folks that aren't familiar with credit reports or kind of have an idea but aren't too sure about their importance, we're going to talk just briefly about why these reports are so essential now. So a credit report, very plainly, this is a document that has information about all of your credit activity. Well, not all of it, a lot of your credit activity and your current credit situation, such as your history of paying any loans or any debts and the status of any of your accounts. Status meaning this account is current, everything is being paid on time, or this account is adverse, there have been late payments, things like that. Who is reporting to credit reports and who is storing the information. So that might be some new information from you all. You have the businesses that are actually maintaining their credit reports. These are your credit bureaus. These are the Equifax, the TransUnion, and the Experian. These are the folks that maintain that record, which I'm sure y'all are familiar of. They're also called consumer reporting agencies too. And there are a lot of consumer reporting agencies that are not Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Those are just the big three. So the credit bureaus are going to collect and store all of that financial data that's submitted to them. It's the creditors that submit that data. A creditor being Capital One, Bank of America, USAA, the lenders, the credit card companies, other finance companies. Those are the businesses that have the accounts and that report those to the credit bureaus. And that's where that information comes from. And so credit reports are used for so many things. One, to get credit. So if you're applying for a loan, lender is more likely than not going to pull your credit report because they want to see the history of payments you've made. One, they want to see if you have any payment history at all. They want to make sure that you've made most, if not all, of your payments on time to determine, okay, I think this person is going to repay this loan. Let's give it to them. Or no, they have a million late payments. We're not going to extend them any credit. Housing. So landlords will use credit report to determine if they'll rent to you. There are, like I mentioned, other consumer reports specifically for landlords that are looking at rental history. However, they will also take a look at your credit report because that's where evictions pop up. So they're going to look to see if you have any evictions. And we all know if you have an eviction, if the survivor has an eviction, it is, I mean, very difficult for them to get future housing unless, they're working with their rapid rehousing program, which even then I had a really hard time getting my clients housing, even through that program. And then employment, not all, but some employers are going to review a potential employee's credit report to decide if they want to hire you. And so these reports are used for all facets of life. And so that's why it is so crucial just for you, not even as an advocate but just as a person to understand the importance of a credit report and what's on it. And so the type of information on a credit report, first, you're going to have personal information, everything identifying about you. Name, any listed addresses, current and past, your birth date, your social security number, phone numbers. So that's the personal information. That's identifying, hey, this is you. This is the person whose accounts this belongs to. Then credit accounts. It's going to be all past credit accounts, but it cuts off at 7 years. Well, bad information cuts off at 7 years. Not all accounts will cut off in 7 years. So current and past credit accounts, the credit limit you have or amount if they're credit cards, the balance if it's a credit card or just like a regular loan, payment history, very detailed information about the payments and accounts that you have. Collection items. So if you've ever had any items sent to collection, they're going to appear in your credit report, as well as missed payments. Now, I will say, just from personal experience, this is not always accurate. I actually did have something go to collections once, but it was never reported to my credit report, which I saw as a win. But just know that it can be. Any public records, and so liens on your homes, any foreclosures, bankruptcy, any civil lawsuits or debt collection judgments that you have been faced with. So let's say a survivor is sued for a debt and they do receive a judgment that they are liable for that debt and have to pay it. That could show up on a credit report. And then any inquiries, this is where the 7 year limit comes in. So in order for whenever a company pulls your credit report to see if they want to lend to you, that's called an inquiry. You end up giving permission for hard inquiries. Hard inquiries are where, let's say I'm applying for a credit card at Bank of America. That's a hard inquiry that stays on your credit report for 2 years. Yes. Soft inquiries fall off quickly as well. Those are where it's not going to damage your credit report. Soft inquiries are usually when a current lender that you're working with just wants to check on your account. So like, let's say I have a Bank of America credit card. I'm not trying to apply for a new one, but Bank of America may do a soft inquiry, a soft pull just to see the status and, maybe see if I qualify for an extended credit line, whatever it may be. Adverse information is what falls off after 7 years. So let's say you have a missed payment that's going to stay on your credit report for 7 years before it falls off. So bad payment history, adverse information, unfortunately, will stay with the survivor for a long time. And so I already talked about it, but just to hit on the points, why are credit reports important? It's an indicator of financial health. It may not always be the most accurate indicator, as we know, but creditors, employers, landlords see this as an indicator of financial health. They want to know if you're able to make your payments on time, if you're a good customer, if you're going to be able to repay them, essentially. Also, to achieve long-term goals. Unfortunately, good credit is what enables you to potentially buy a house, to get a new car, to get a really nice job. And so it's really important for survivors to access their credit reports for anybody, but specifically for survivors for a couple of reasons. One, in order to identify coerced debts. So because credit reports keep all of this information, reviewing credit reports is a key way for survivors to recognize, oh no, I don't remember this debt, or I didn't take this out, this is coerced. Or for them to look at accounts they already have and see unauthorized use, which definitely does happen too. It's also just important for survivors to know what information is just on a credit report so that they know what steps to take to address coerced debts. This is really important information that, often when we see survivors come into shelter, they may not be thinking about their credit, right? They're thinking about their immediate safety needs. And so we are aware, and this was at least in my experience, survivors don't usually have the capacity or bandwidth at the time of entering shelter, or sometimes even just entering a DV program in general, to think about their financial health or well-being until some of their other needs are met. But there are some that are. And so for those clients, it is really great to try and explore and help them learn more about their financial capabilities, what their credit score is, what their credit report is, and why it is important to do as much as they can to improve all of those conditions. But again, so much is outside of the control of the survivor. Okay, and now we're just going to go over the ways to pull a credit report. And so you're going to hear me say annualcreditreport.com a lot, because that is the main way to pull a credit report. And so you'll see, if you Google pull my credit report, Google, whatever browser you use, you're going to see a lot of different links, potentially from a lot of different companies, saying, hey, here you go, create an account, pay this fee, you can get your credit report. Even the credit bureaus have their own payment systems to where you can pay them to access not just your credit report, but a lot of other information. You can do that. I advise against it because it costs money. There is one way to guarantee a free copy of your credit report, and that is annualcreditreport.com. We're going to take a look at this website just so y'all can see what it looks like. It looks very simple, but I'm going to put the link in the chat. This is the only website authorized by the federal government to issue credit reports. There are a lot of websites that look like this, that try to mimic this, but that are not this. And so that's why I wanted to show y'all what it looks like. And this is where it's important to go when you're helping a survivor pull their credit report, or when you're telling them where to go to pull a credit report. And there are 3 ways to do it, which are very standard and essentially assume that you're submitting some type of application. You normally can do it by 3 ways. You can do it online, you can do it by phone, or you can do it by mail. That's the same way here. You can pull your credit report in all 3 of these ways. And so we're going to look at what those 3 ways are. For online. So in order to request your credit report online, like I said, you're going to go to annualcreditreport.com. You're going to select request your free credit report. And after this slide, y'all, we're going to go actually look at the website so y'all can see. And it's going to ask you some basic information: first name, last name, date of birth, social security number, current and past addresses. This is the information that is on your credit report. And so that's why they're asking. They want to make sure you are who you say you are. It's then going to ask you, let's say that goes through, they're able to verify at that first point. They're going to ask you which credit report you want. You want to select all 3. Again, this is where you can get all 3, but you have to check the box that you want all 3. Now, let's say you have limited time with the survivor and you can only do one, then pull the very first one, pull Equifax. You don't have to do all 3, but we encourage you to if time is not an issue. Then it's going to ask you to verify your identity. We'll get into a little bit more of the different verification techniques, but this is potentially a barrier for a survivor if they're not able to answer all of the identity questions. And then let's say they do move through with identity verification. Once the credit report appears on the screen, you just have to select print credit report. Sometimes the websites are wonky, so what you'll have to do is act like you're printing it, or yeah, so act like you print it, but then you can just save it. And so I'll show y'all what that looks like. Okay, so now y'all, we're gonna go here, and this is the website here, annualcreditreport.com. And so it just looks very simple, very plain, but here's the website. And boom, right here, this doesn't move. It will say request your free credit reports. When we click on this, it's going to give you just an overview of what the steps are. This whole process takes about 10 minutes. I have done this many times. I actually was a victim of identity theft 3 years ago, actually now, and had to pull my credit reports weekly to make sure that they were not still trying to use my social security number. So I do this very often, and the first time takes about 10 minutes or so. After that, you kind of just get in a groove. And so the filling out the form is putting in your identifying information. So request your credit reports. Now I can't go past this, y'all, because I don't want to show y'all all of my personal information, but this is the information it's going to ask: your name, your birthday, your social. If you only have to give your past address if you haven't been at your current address for more than 2 years. So here you're going to put your current address. If you've been there for 5 years, all you have to do is hit yes and click next, and then it's going to move you on. And so this is the information that it's going to ask for. Let's see how I get back here. Okay. They changed the colors of the website, so this screenshot shows red, which is what it just was. They just changed the colors. So it's going to look the same, and that's the button you're going to press. And again, here is the screen that you were going to see. This is after I put in my personal information. This is a screenshot. So once you put in that personal information, it's then going to ask you to check the boxes of which one you want. Again, I really recommend that you click all three if time allows, and then you'll hit next. So that's how you do it online. Once you hit next, it's going to walk you through each credit report. Let's say for some reason online's not working. Let's say a survivor maybe doesn't have access to a computer, or they want to do it by phone, whatever it is. That is another option. Sometimes survivors do have a hard time accessing their credit reports online. Maybe they're not able to verify their identity through one of the credit bureaus. Maybe there's internet issues, whatever it may be. So phone's the next best option. However, just know that you're not talking to a real person when you do it over the phone. You are talking to an automated machine. You end up calling this number here. I'm also going to show you where to find the number on the website, and it's going to ask for all the same information. You just have to speak it. So it's going to ask for personal information, and then it's going to ask for your current address. It's not going to ask for a past address. It's then going to ask you which credit bureaus you want to select. You can say Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, or you can just say all three. And then it's going to process your request. And it's going to mail you the request. So online, you're going to get it right then and there. You can print save. By phone, it's going to mail it to you. And so on the website, this is actually where you can find the number. So I'm actually going to show you on the website too. So we're going to go back. So we've got all about credit reports. There's a lot of information that you can explore if you want, but it's not necessary. All about credit reports, it takes you to just some basic information about them. What is the credit report, and getting your credit reports. And this is another way to see the exact same information I'm telling y'all. Survivors can go look at this themselves. It'll tell you online, and it'll tell you by phone. And then here's that phone number to call. I think I got it now. Okay. And then the very last option is mail. This is the least recommended, but there are survivors that may have to access their request by filling out a form and mailing it. And so you have to go find the form online, and then you have to download it and print it off. You end up having to mail it in. You can't fax, so you have to do it by mail to Annual Credit Report Request Service. And then once received, it will still be the 15-day processing. And so this is what the form looks like, y'all. It again asks for all of the exact same information that the phone and online does, just in another way. And I'm going to show y'all here. Again, back on the website, when you go to all about credit reports and getting your credit report, again, it'll have the form right here, request form, and then boom. You can, no, you can't type into it. If you have like Adobe Acrobat, you can download it and type it in the information. I find it easiest to just print it. And it's going to ask for all of that same information and then where you want the credit report from. So this is the least ideal way. But for example, survivors that have, what is it, like an I-10 number, I think is what it might be, often have to mail in a request for their credit reports. They're usually not able to go through the online and phone process. Sometimes they are, but I've noticed with my clients that have an I-10 number, they have to go through the mailing route. Again, not preferred, but just another way. All right, y'all. So does anyone have any questions about kind of walking through those three methods, the website, any general questions pertaining to just pulling the credit reports?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm Jocelyn. I work with Genesis. Just a quick question. I've helped survivors before do a request by mail due to having just some issues with the online process.
Mhm.
Mailing it out, is it also a free service? I've seen somewhere that said something about a $15 fee.
So mailing, unfortunately, is not, I don't believe there's a standard fee. I have not actually personally mailed, but you do have to provide your own stamp to mail. So there is that cost. And also when folks do mail, In order to track the submission, we also recommend, if they're able to afford it, to do certified receipt. So essentially paying for, I want the tracking information and I want a certification of when they receive it. And that costs money. That can cost up to $15. So that might be what you've heard, but to just mail it, no, you just need a stamp. But again, that does cost money.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, awesome. Any other questions, y'all? Okie dokie, y'all. And so a couple of safety considerations that I think are really important to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about survivors and their privacy. There are unique challenges in pulling credit reports. For an everyday person who's not concerned about their safety, they're going to overlook these, but I think it's really important for us to talk about some of those issues that also present as barriers to pulling a credit report. And so safety considerations. First, if you are requesting a report, just in general, mainly by mail or by phone for it to be mailed. So in pulling credit reports, it's very important to use a safe address or one that's unknown to the abuser. Online, for example, if you're applying or if you're trying to access your credit report online, you can put whatever address you want. You actually don't have to put an accurate address. Just note there are some folks who don't, they'll just kind of put whatever address. Because whatever information you're putting in to access your credit report becomes a part of that file. And so, for example, let's say you are going to access your credit report, but you know that your abuser also knows how to. That's hard to change. But let's say they don't know where you are and they're relying on you to provide your updated address. You don't want to do that. And so, a lot of survivors will put like an incorrect address just to access it online. However, if you're ordering it by phone or by mail, you actually have to give the correct address, right? So you can get it. And so when the credit report is sent to the address on file, again, it is just so important that it's sent to a safe address. It could just be so terrible for that credit report to be sent to the address where, for example, the abuser still lives. And now they have all of this information about the survivor. And then again, any address or telephone or email that you're sharing with the credit bureau when trying to access the report does become a part of their file. So just be careful with the information that you are providing in the case that the abuser has access to the survivor's credit report. And now for verification. So there are two credit bureaus that have a very simple verification process to access a credit report. Equifax and TransUnion just do two-factor authentication. So they're going to ask for either your phone number and your email, and then they're going to send like a one-time passcode, and then you just have to type in whatever that passcode is, and boom, you can access their credit report. Experian is different. They have a higher threshold for accessibility. So they're going to ask identity verification questions. These are the questions I'm sure y'all have seen that say, who is the carrier of your 2019 car loan? And it'll have like USAA, Bank of America, whatever, and you have to select that. Or what is the name of the street you lived in 10 years ago? Like those very specific questions about your finances. Those are the questions Experian will ask to verify your identity. That's not difficult if you, well, sometimes it can be a little difficult even if you know everything, if you have like a long credit history. But for example, for me, I'm able to answer every question because I know all the debts under my name. But let's say one of those questions ends up being asked about a coerced debt that a survivor doesn't know about. Then they're not able to access their credit report just because they couldn't answer that one question. So that could be a potential barrier and just something to keep in mind. There's a good chance a survivor may not be able to answer the verification questions from Experian, but you definitely should still try because they could get lucky. So just something to be very aware of. Okay, and now I'm just going to show y'all what it looks like to actually look at a credit report. Again, y'all don't have to look at these credit reports and do an intense review or anything like that, but you might be curious to look at a credit report. And let's say a survivor wants you to help them and they want you to look at it. It's important for you to actually know what it looks like so you can help them. So we're not going to go into a very intense review that could take hours, but we are just going to kind of capture some of the highlights because unfortunately, all three credit reports look very different from each other. And so, like I mentioned, each credit report looks different. And so it can make looking at accounts difficult to even really understand what you're looking at. And so, again, the big three credit bureaus are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and they're organized differently. So we'll take a look here in a second. Equifax organizes their accounts in four different categories. First, it's going to be any revolving accounts. These are accounts that are like a credit card, accounts where you're continuing to have a balance that you can pay down, but then you can charge back up like a credit card. Any mortgages, and then I'll go to installments. Let's say I have a car loan that I pay in monthly installments, and then that balance goes down to zero. So anything like that. And then other. So Equifax is organized by type of account in that sense. Experian is organized in two ways, and it really depends. I have two reports that are organized in two different ways. It'll either have accounts that are open and then closed, easy enough, or it'll list all of your accounts alphabetically. And then TransUnion or only organize it in one way. It'll first start off with accounts that have adverse information. Again, a missed payment, or it's delinquent, or it's charged off. And then it'll go into your satisfactory accounts. So all labeled in different ways and organized in different ways. And it can be a lot if you haven't looked at it before. It can feel overwhelming. And so I want to give y'all a brief look at what the different credit reports look like, just so you have a sense of what you're pulling. Okay, and so we're going to start with Equifax. And so I have a redacted version of an Equifax report, and here's what the first page is going to look like. So you also see up here, it says 16 pages. I actually went through and removed information that wasn't necessary. I think this report was about 60 pages, so they can be very, very long. I just want to warn you. Let's say you are able to pull a credit report and it's like 80 pages. Just know that that is what you're going to end up sharing to Texas Advocacy Project, and that's okay. It's however long it is. So the first will just say Equifax. It'll say credit report. This will be the name and then the confirmation number, but that's redacted here, so you can't see that. And then it's going to go into a summary. So a lot of these will start with a summary of just general accounts that we're looking at for the report. So here you've got, and let me zoom in case it's easier to read on. You've got report date. So this is the date that you pulled it. If there's a credit file for this credit report, it's actually frozen. So it'll say that. Jocelyn, you asked, do you prefer a paper copy for tap or is online? Online is absolutely preferable. One, because it's a lot of paper to print. And two, we're more inclined to like not have to print so much personal information, which then needs to be shredded. So you can just, for example, here, if I hit print, but then I hit save as PDF, that's an option, then it saves as an online copy. And so that's what's absolutely preferred, to just attach with that referral form. Or if you need to send in a different email, then you can send in a different email as well. Here it'll just have like the average, just like some general statistics, something that's super important for all to look at. Just gives an overview of the reports here. Average account age, the length of the credit history with Equifax. And something I forgot to mention, why it's important to pull all three, this is on me, is because not all three have the same information. There are definitely accounts that vary. So Equifax can have different accounts than TransUnion and then Experian. That's why we encourage folks to pull all three if time allows, because you may not be capturing the full picture if you're only pulling one credit report. It'll have the oldest account opened and the most recent account opened. And then it'll kind of go over the account types. Remember, Equifax is organized by these different categories. How many have a balance, and all of this, all the numbers, all the details, and then any other information here. So if there's any public records found, any inquiries, personal information, collections, all of the things. And so I wanted to show y'all on this one, I pulled 3 accounts that are going to be the same across all 3 credit bureaus, so you can see how different they look. So this is revolving, meaning this is most likely some like a credit card. And for here, Capital One, you can figure out if it is a credit card. And Equifax is probably one of the harder reports to read just because it provides a lot of boxes and images. It's actually just going to have like these calendar breakouts of a lot of different information. Again, this is nothing you'll have to look at, but I think is important to just know what each of these reports has. So you got lots of information here, the balance, if it carried one, what it was, any available credit, any scheduled payments, any actual payments made. Oh, see y'all, actually, this report was 129 pages. My bad, I didn't remember how long it was. Very long, very long. Don't worry about how long it is, just attach it. All of these different calendars, blah, 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 blah. And then you actually get to account details. So again, this is still just for the Capital One. I know it's a credit card because I've looked at this, but loan type, credit card. So everything you need to know about the account. If there's a high credit limit or high credit, what it is, the credit limit, how often the payment is. I mean, a lot of information, but you'll see not all of it is filled out. That doesn't mean that it's zero. A lot of times you'll see just incomplete information here. The owner, it's an individual, meaning it's not joint. There's only one person on it. And all this other information. And then contact information of the originator of the debt. So this would be Capital One's contact information. So that's what a credit card looks like. Then we're going to want to go to an account that's closed. So this says USAA Savings Bank closed. It's probably not a savings account, y'all, because again, this is a credit report, but it's just with USAA Savings Bank. It's closed. Reported balance is 0, which makes sense because it's closed. And then the same calendars, exact same thing. There's a lot more activity here, which means it might be a account that was open longer. So all of this activity is redacted out here. And then now here you can see more account details. So this was a secured credit card. And that means you upfront money, and however much money you upfront is the essentially revolving limit on the credit card. And this is usually something that helps people establish credit if they don't have an account. An individual account monthly, the balance is 0. It was open for 48 months. Was that 4 years? I think if my math's right. Paid and closed. Yep. And then account closed at consumer's request. Boom. And then our final account that we're going to look at, well, also here, there's no mortgage accounts. So if there's nothing, it'll tell you that there's nothing here. Okay, last one, again, a USAA Federal Savings Bank. This is installment. My guess is it would be like, look, a auto or a student loan. In this case, this is a car loan. And so here's all the activity. It makes sense that there's no available credit because it's a car loan. There's no credit line for a car loan, usually. And more information here, fixed rate, just all additional information. We haven't looked at this, but this is like an account with payment history. If you see X's, or no, you'll see like, if you see anything red, that's usually not good. Here, everything's been paid on time, but clearly there's some missing information here. It just says no data, which happens. And then account information. So yep, it's a loan type. It's an auto loan. The owner here, what's different, it's joint contract liability, meaning there's at least 2 people on this. There's not just one. Monthly, it's been reviewed for 33 months. So yeah, y'all, I think that might be the last account I have. Yes, so those are 3 accounts, and we'll see how they look different on the other report reports. And then some other information too. Inquiries. So this is something that we find increasingly important for survivors to look at. I actually had an advocate reach out to me saying that after looking at their credit report, they looked at the hard inquiries and saw that the abuser was still trying to take out debt. And so this actually can be one way you can identify if an abuser is still trying to take out debt. So it's going to have the list of the hard inquiry. These are ones that they do impact your credit score and your credit report. And they'll remain on your file up to 2 years. So after 2 years, they'll fall off. So at the time this was pulled, they were still on. So it'll have the date and then the company and all the information. And then again, soft inquiries are the ones that are like typically account reviews. There are usually there could be up to hundreds of soft inquiries. There's no need to look at them all. It's just something that's interesting to kind of see. Okay. So that is Equifax, y'all. One of the not as pretty reports to look at. And now we're going to look at Experian. So Experian, I'm going to show you all the 3 same accounts so you can see how different they look. Experian here, you can see this was pulled from annual credit report as well. The date the report was generated, and this actually gives you just a better visual. There's 27 accounts and 11 hard inquiries. Much better visual, cleaner to understand. And then all of the names, records, and whatnot, all of that's right here. Any addresses are right here. The year of birth and any phone numbers. Personal statement. Here, ID security alert, which makes sense. On the last report from Equifax, we saw that there's a credit freeze, so it looks like there's an identity security alert here, meaning it's it's not just a freeze. They have said that they're a victim of identity theft and have put an alert, but there's also a freeze because it says file frozen. Okay, now we're going to look at the other accounts. So starting with that Capital One credit card, see how it already looks so much different. The account information is up front. It's just listed here. It has most of the same information, just organized in a different way. So this is the exact same account, just easier to look at. And then they'll also have that calendar like Equifax did, but just less information to look at. And then any payments and contact information, boom. So Equifax is a lot more extended, a lot more information. Experian is more to the point. Next, looking at that secured credit card, again, account information up front. Auto loan. Oh, sorry, y'all, my bad. This is the auto loan. The auto loan. the date opened, and all more information. This time the term says 66 months. On the last one, it said 33 months. Again, inconsistent information, y'all. Just want to point that out. This is why it's good to check your credit reports. But that's not something that would be considered damaging, just an inconsistency. All of the scheduled payments or payments that have been made, it makes sense. It's a car loan, a lot of payments. And then finally, the next account is that secured card. Again, boom, same exact information, y'all. Everything's accurate, paid and closed and never late. And then the payment history and all the payments that were made. So y'all can see that already there is different sets of information, just a little bit, and it's organized differently. Hard inquiries, it lists here as well. This time you actually can see the names of these ones, which makes sense, like Capital One, USAA, that adds up. And then some other cards here. And then soft inquiries, it lists. I don't think this report has every single one, but this report you see, y'all, is only 60 pages. Already, that's half of the Equifax report, which makes sense since the Equifax report is so long. All right, and then finally, TransUnion. So this is the TransUnion report. There are 74 pages here, and it lays out your information a little bit more similarly to Equifax. Report number, name, and the date created. All of your personal information here, any potential nicknames or other names, current address, all of your previous, not all of your previous addresses, but a good amount of your previous addresses, and phone numbers, 2 phone numbers. And then this is going to go by adverse accounts and satisfactory accounts. And then this gives you a key of all the different acronyms and markings, which is a lot. We don't need to go through all that. Okay, so now back, we're at satisfactory accounts. So the ones that I'm showing you clearly are all satisfactory then. Capital One. So presents, again, the same information, but this time it's just laid out a little bit differently. Credit card type, last time it was updated, date opened. It's not as pretty as Experian, but still very clear to read. And then this whole payment calendar history here. And that's that for that one. And then we have, I think this might be the car payment. Yep, automobile, same information, y'all, same story, all of it just laid out for y'all to take a look at. And then payment history, that calendar is all redacted. And then the secured credit card, the last one, savings bank, they opened, revolving, secured credit card, paid, closed, same information, just laid out differently. This is a little bit more explicit, and this says that it's closed here, and then your payment calendar. And then for inquiries, this says regular instead of hard. So regular inquiries are the hard inquiries here. So you can see Capital One, SunTrust. You'll see ones on here that are not the same on the other reports, and that's how it happens sometimes. Also, not all businesses report information to all 3 credit bureaus too, so that's why you can see a difference. And then the promotional inquiries are the soft inquiries. So here, just an example, a couple examples of these, and then account review. All right, y'all. So those are the 3 credit reports at a glance. A lot of information, all of it very similar, just laid out in a different way. Any questions on the credit reports, y'all, before we shift to one of our final topics? Okay, y'all. And so let's say now that you've at least pulled a credit report, you pulled 1, 2, maybe even all 3, what are you supposed to do? And so the next step is to refer to TAP. You have the option, sure, to make the referral to Texas Advocacy Project TAP and then pull a credit report. But what we're finding is that advocates usually aren't going back to pull a credit report after they made the referral. So that's why we really encourage you to pull the credit report first. And so the steps for referring a survivor to TAP. This won't come as a surprise. First step is to use that screening tool to identify survivor's eligibility. That's not this form here. That's the tool that has all the boxes that asks those questions. We recently updated that tool, y'all. And essentially, if a survivor answers yes to even one of those questions, then you make the referral. So they could say yes to one and no to all the other ones, but it's okay because they said yes to one. And if they want to move forward, then you refer. You're then going to complete the TAP referral form. So that's this form here. And the next page, it'll be bigger. We recently updated it. So it says updated November 2024. Once you complete this and you pull at least 1 credit report, then you're going to email it. And these emails should look familiar to y'all if y'all have done a referral. So case referral, these are the intake specialists. And then M. Gray, that's Melissa. She's the main coordinator at TAP, who also needs to be on every single referral. Lately, she's been getting referrals without being CC'd on them. They end up coming to her, but it takes weeks, and we don't want that for a survivor. So make sure you're putting both email addresses on the referral. And if you only end up putting one, put hers. It also says it here on the form. And so here's the form a little bit zoomed in. Again, very familiar information. It's going to ask for the agency that you're a part of, information about the survivor here, best way to contact, information about the abuser that you have, and then other helpful information. What could be helpful to put here? One is we know TAP knows if TAP gets this form, it's for the pilot program because it says it here. So you don't have to put here for the pilot program. You can though. However, what could be useful here is if a survivor you're referring happens to have another legal issue. So for example, let's say they have a divorce or custody legal issue and they need help with. You can put that here too. You can combine referrals. You don't have to do two separate ones. If it's easier for you to, sure, but this way it's easier for TAP to see all of the survivor's needs on one document. It's going to ask for the language they speak, any additional information to know, whatever you find helpful. And then we recently added some more information here related to credit reports. So we're going to see if you were able to attach a credit report to please check which one, as long as you have the survivor's permission. And then if you weren't able to pull a credit report, can you please indicate why? This could be you didn't have the time and you need to make the referral. This also could be you did try to pull a credit report and there was some open dispute and it wouldn't let you. Or we couldn't verify her identity, so I couldn't pull the report. Really, whatever the reason is, just let us know because this helps us figure out the best way to get credit reports. And then finally, if you're attaching that screening tool, which so far every referral has, just make sure you click there so we know to expect it and make sure you have the survivor's permission. And so again, there are two ways to make a referral. So far, we have gotten all referrals through this first option. So I just want to make sure we go over that again. This is the option where the survivor wants you to help them make the referral. So first, you're determining the eligibility by your completing that screening tool once again. Also, you're making sure the survivor understands what goes into a referral. Make them understand that someone will be contacting them. So TAP will end up calling them after you make the referral so that they can move forward in the process. We've had a decent amount of survivors, unfortunately, not accept that call, whether it be they decided to change their minds or they don't accept calls from numbers they don't know. It's important to note that the call will come from a number that says unknown number. So it will not just be digits, if that's helpful. And so just let them know, to expect a phone call, regardless of if they're officially eligible or not, they will get called by TAP. TAP calls 3 times. If they don't hear back after 3 times over a set of a week or two, then they close the case. And so it's okay if you have a survivor that you made a referral to who ended up, not answering TAP's phone call, but wants to go through the process again, you absolutely can make another referral. You're going to complete that TAP intake form that we just took a look at. You're going to complete an ROI for the survivor. You're not required to do this, but in terms of on TAP side, but this I think is very important for each agency to do this so that you can disseminate that information, disseminate the referral and the screening form. And also, if the survivor wants you to talk to TAP about their case, then as an advocate, you're able to do that if you have the ROI. And then again, you're going to email that form to both of these email addresses, which are also on the form. This is a second option. I'll still highlight it in case a survivor wants to go this route. This route means that they want to do it themselves. They don't want an advocate in the middle. And this could happen for a lot of different reasons. There are some survivors who may not want to sign a release of information. If that's the case, they don't have to. They will just have to go through this path. They can just contact TAP directly. TAP is aware of the pilot program, and so they can call by phone and speak to a TAP member, or they can do it online. I'll send this out so you'll have the presentation too. TAP's online website has an online application that they can complete if they feel more comfortable doing that. I will just note that because this would not be a referral from a DV program, it will take longer for them to be referred to a TAP attorney. So I just want to make that known that the wait could be longer, or most likely will be longer. Okay, y'all, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I would love to know if anyone has any thoughts, if anyone has any final questions. I know we covered a lot. A lot of this should have been a refresher, but for folks that are newer or that just, needed a reminder of how to pull credit reports in the process, please feel free to ask any questions you might have, or if you need any clarifying information at all. You also can chat me if that's easier. Privately too, if you want. Okay. Looks like I just got a private chat. So let me read your question. Can I still make a referral if I'm not able to pull a credit report? Yes, you are. It has unfortunately happened. We've had some advocates reach out before we updated the form to say that I tried, but there was a block. I couldn't do it. Can I still refer? Absolutely. We definitely don't want to stop the referral process, but just know that at some point we do have to get a credit report to figure out what we are trying to fight. And so there will be more opportunities for us to do that. So please try to pull a credit report, but if you're unable to because of reasons due to not being able to actually get it, then please make the referral and just indicate that on the referral form. Have you had any successful referrals for undocumented clients with coerced debt yet? Successful, yes. Yes, we have. So how I'm interpreting successful is they have an undocumented client has been referred, and we have been able to pull their credit report and then determine they have coerced debt. Yes, we have. We also, and this happens too, a lot of survivors that are referred unfortunately are not eligible, but we have had a couple of folks that are undocumented that we still access their credit report, but they weren't eligible because they weren't coerced debts. Is that only if they have an I-10? What if they don't have either? So I don't know the specifics, Neha. I actually don't know if they had I-10s or not. So I can try and get some of that more detailed information from you. I would need to ask TAP to see if that's something they could even disclose to me, but I think that could be helpful. But I'll follow up because I'm actually not sure about that. Something that could be helpful to know too, y'all, is where we're at in the process is we've officially had, of course, over 50 referrals into the pilot program. So 50 folks have officially been referred in. And of those 50, we right now have 9 that are in the process of working with attorneys, which is really, really amazing. Again, we do thorough assessments, TAP does, over clients, reviewing their credit reports to make sure that they're eligible. And some folks, unfortunately, aren't eligible. That can be for a lot of different reasons, y'all. They can have a coerced debt, but it be outside of the timeline, the time frame, and so we're actually not able to help them. Or oftentimes survivors decide to pull out of the process. And so that's why we end up having an incomplete referral per se. And so right now we have 9 survivors that are getting paired with attorneys to move forward in the actual legal representation part, which is really, really amazing. And so we're hoping to start having some updates and insights there into what's working. Does anyone else have any questions? Whether it be about credit reports, making referrals, or if you have specific clients you have in mind and you're not sure if they have coerced debts, any questions you ask. I've got one in the chat. Oh, that's basically what I just said. What if I'm not sure if they have a coerced debt or not? That's okay. Refer anyway. I just had a client or an advocate reach out saying they're not too sure, and I told them word for word, when in doubt, refer anyway. It is not y'all's jobs to look and determine if it's coerced debt. We've given you the knowledge to look and see, okay, hey, we think so, but your best assessment is that screening tool. And as long as they answer yes, make the referral anyway. It is up to the attorneys. They have the expertise and the ability to really look at the bigger picture and determine if it's coerced debt. And so you don't have to stress about should I refer or not. As long as they answer yes to one of those questions, absolutely refer and feel confident in doing that. All right, and I got another question. I think this might be the last one. How can I get updates about my client's referral? This is a great question, and a couple of y'all have emailed me too. So that's going to depend on the survivor themselves. So if a survivor referred themselves to TAP, if they contacted TAP, the only information you'll get is if a survivor wants to share it with you. Kind of same for if you make a referral. So if you have an ROI and TAP has an ROI and they're able to share information with you, they can. But again, that's only if the survivor wants to. And so, as I'm sure some of y'all have experienced, you can honestly expect to not hear any updates because after you make the referral, that's really up to the survivor now what information they want to share as they go on that referral journey. And so don't get discouraged if you make a referral and you don't hear back. That kind of is the nature of referral work in general. But just know that once we get those referrals, we start moving. And so none are ever not moving. All right, y'all. I don't have any other questions in the chat. And it looks like y'all are going to get 30 minutes back. So I'm going to stay on until everyone leaves. I'm going to stop recording.